Yeah, I'm Paul Schaefer.
I'm Will Lee.
And you are watching the Letterman Podcast.
Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. Okay, I'm stoked about this episode, all right? And it's funny because the guest, Janice Penino, who, among many, many other things throughout her career, headed up HR for Worldwide Pants. In fact, she helped kind of develop the entire HR program, human resource program for Worldwide Pants. And to me, that is endlessly fascinating. I think by the end of this episode, you will be somewhat fascinated by it as well. I love the fact that Worldwide Pants, as an entity, got to do what it did with the Late Show and the Late Late Show, and then of course the other things that they produced, and we're going to hopefully get into a lot of that stuff in the life cycle of the Letterman Podcast. But really, at the end of the day, Janice used to head the page program for NBC, and if you've watched shows like Saturday Night Live or 30 Rock or whatnot, there are shows that poke fun or at least highlight in humorous ways the page program. Janice used to head that up. She used to work for Howard Stern, and I just love the fact that she had that under her belt and was brought forward to help spearhead a new department of a broadcast company that in many ways was in its infancy, or at least the evolution of it was a significant place as the Late Show with David Letterman came over to CBS and started spreading its wings and becoming a thing. She was a major part of that. And I just love knowing the ins and outs of some of the behind the scenes workings of how the business operated, the things that she had to contend with as she built this department. And then also if you've watched this show or listened to this show, first off, thank you very much. You've seen some of the interns that we've had on, and many of them credit back, not just the interns, actually, some of the folks who started, at the very bottom rung of the ladder in Worldwide Pants have mentioned Janice Penino many times as we have, gone and had these amazing conversations. So having Janice on, I bugged her for a long time, and we finally made it happen. I'm so happy about that. And here's the thing about Janice too. I adore this about her. She wants the best for people, and she wants to build into people. And you could tell that that's who she was when she interviewed people and brought them in and onboarded them into Pants. But afterwards, at the end of this episode, we talk a lot about what it takes to make it in this world, to impress employers, to be a good interviewee. And she really has a heart for helping upbuild people. And that is something I very much appreciate about her. Something I share with her. I love doing that as well. And I really like this lady a lot. I have a past employment with Costco. I was with Costco for a couple of decades, and she finds that fascinating. It's one of her favorite stores. And so she and I have had a couple of really great phone conversations, and then just this amazing episode. So without further ado, the Letterman Podcast, proud to present the heart and soul of human resources for Worldwide Pants, Janice Penino. All right, Janice, a little bit of insight into me and who I am. This has been an episode that I have been so excited about doing for a long time. The head of HR and all that. I am so excited to talk to you today, and I know it baffles your mind.
Completely baffles my mind. I suggest you get out of the house more often.
No, and by the end of this, I believe that everybody who listens to the discussion points that we have today will understand where I'm coming from, because again, I am fascinated by Worldwide Pants and how Worldwide Pants, how Dave basically, when he moved from NBC to CBS, in many respects got a continuation of the Johnny Carson contract, which Johnny busted his butt forever to get, and it included ownership of the show. And that is a huge, in my opinion, milestone, unique moment that we'll probably never see ever again. I have a very hard time believing that any one of the major networks would ever sell 2 hours, it doesn't matter what time of day, is to an entity to put on a show. And you are the one who got to build the HR behind that. And in that time, you saw the internet show up and become part of things. You saw basically HR become an entire industry around you, and it all happened on your watch. And so I'm very, very excited to talk about this with you, Janice. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the Letterman podcast.
You're welcome.
All right, before we get to the pants of it all, you I gotta ask you, were you a fan of the show 30 Rock?
I worked at 30 Rock.
I know.
And so I worked peripherally on that show at 30 Rock because I was in charge of the guest relations department at
Page
NBC.
program.
Correct.
Yeah.
And one of our responsibilities as guest relations was to handle all of the audiences that had to be brought into 30 Rock and outside of the building too, because we did the audiences for the Cosby Show and they taped at Kaufman Astoria, but we did Saturday Night Live, we did Donahue, we did whatever other little productions might come through, and we did Letterman. So that's how I got to know the people on the show through that job. So I was not like a crazed super fan like so many people who ended up working on the show were. Like I wasn't dying ever to like, this is my dream come true to work on this particular show. I was a fan. I liked it. I have a lot of memories of watching it with family members and things, the old NBC show.
Yep.
And so I thought it was a great show. And as I got to know the people there, I really liked them. And I thought they were all smart and funny. And so when the opportunity came along to go to CBS with them, I was really, really, really excited about being able to start their audience department from scratch. And so that job was a lot of fun.
And the reason I ask if you were a fan of the show 30 Rock is I think people who watched that show, they saw the pages and how the pages were part of things and all of that. Saturday Night Live too. They would always, there would be sketches all the time that would talk about the NBC pages. The fact that you ran that program, kind of another little, again, for broadcast nerds, that's a little piece of iconic, territory that you got to run for a long time. And, you know, you can listen to David Katz's interview with Janice talking about the NBC Page program. It's worth listening to for sure. She tells a lot of stories about that. But yes, one of the takeaways I had from that is how much you enjoyed working. That's a very expansive position that you had there. Again, all the different shows, the guest relations portion of it. Heck, your boss is in Burbank. I mean, good Lord, that's expansive. But you really excel at relationships and you like working in a smaller environment. And when you got to Worldwide Pants, it was a lot smaller of a group than what you had over at NBC, right?
Well, it was a completely different setup. I ran a department it started out with, I think there were 7 of us managing the department in and of itself, and then all of the pages, and those numbers varied as years went by.
Yep.
But we were, you know, a cog in a huge corporate machine.
Yes.
So I had worked at WNBC Radio before that, which was very small. That's a whole other story. That place was a lot of fun and a little crazy, but
and not just because of Howard, but other things too.
It was Don Imus, it was Howard Stern, it was Susan Sales, it was Wolfman Giant, and it was all in the 1980s. So there's an entire other chapter that it would take hours to talk about that place. But I discovered from that guest relationship that working in that big corporate environment was not really my wheelhouse. And my favorite part of that job was working with the pages and having them come and sit in my office and tell me what their ambitions are and helping in whatever way that I possibly could to even just listen to them and go. I mean, I was not much older than many of them were. You know, I was only, I think, 28 when I got that job. So I was, you know, 6 years older than most of them. So I didn't have a lot of life experience to impart, but I just listened to what they had to say and hopefully gave them some halfway decent advice to get them out the door and moving on to whatever their next thing was. So I really, really liked that. And the audience part of it just was another part of doing that job. So when I got to know the folks at Letterman and then they were moving over, somebody from the show had reached out to me, and because I had left NBC at that point and gone back into working in radio, and said, "Hey, how are you? What's going on?" And I said, "What are you guys doing about your audiences?" Because the way it was set up at NBC was you did not really control who sat in your seats. NBC did, guest relations did. Each show paid guest relations to handle the audience services for them. So I knew that wasn't the ideal scenario. And so I just asked the question, like, what are you folks going to do about your audiences? And this person that I spoke to said, get in touch with, one of our producers. And I did. And to make a long story short, I ended up starting their audience department. And I did that job for 3 years. And there came a time when everyone on the show sort of realized, we're our own company. We don't have certain supports that we might have had at NBC.
Yep.
And there were different people on the staff who were doing different functions of HR. And they decided that they wanted to have it all housed under one person. And I was going on maternity leave with my first child, who's now 27 and married. And they said, "Janice, do you think you want to do this?" And for a lot of reasons, it was a really good idea for me. And so I said, sure. And I went away and had this baby and came back to a stack of stuff on my desk that said, here you go.
Yeah.
You're going to figure that out.
Yeah.
So it was such a golden opportunity. I know people who tried to get into HR just in the world. Yep. You get your master's degree and you do all these things and you get certifications. And I just was given this chance and a chance to make it up as I went along and to mold it to what I thought it could and should be.
Yeah.
And so I did that job for 19 years. And my favorite part of that job was the opportunity to work with the interns and the opportunity to work with employees and watch them grow and watch them succeed. And some of them, moved on and left show business altogether, because I feel like if there is anything else that will make you happy, go do that, because it's very hard to work in television, especially on the production side. It's very competitive. There are no shows that last 22 years. It just doesn't happen. You're constantly jumping from thing to thing to thing. It's tough. So if there's anything else that makes you happy, go do that. I felt like I was very lucky because I feel like I was on the fringes. I got to be part of what was an amazing organization with a group of super smart, fun, creative, lovely people, but I wasn't worrying about, what the top 10 was going to be that night. I had other worries, but that wasn't one of them.
I love that you talked about this because at the end of the day, you think about the HR person at, people who are listening to this or watching this, you think about the HR person, who runs the department in whatever workplace environment that you have. It's a very important person. If you don't have a relationship with that person, it can be trying on the employee. And I'm glad that you talked about how important relationships are to you. I was going to say this for one of the other parts of the episode, but I'll say it right now. You might be the most loved person on that staff. There isn't a person that I have talked to that if your name has come up, and it's mostly off camera, but it's even come on camera a couple of times when we've had some of the interns who just sing your praises, gush about you. Amy Sharon's podcast is dropping this Friday. And I was just talking with her about that. And she's like, "Oh, you're talking to Janice. Please tell Janice I said hi." Like she got all excited to talk about that. I get that all the time about you. And I adore that. So one of the things that you and I've connected on is in my past, I worked for Costco wholesale. I worked for Costco for a long time. I still love Costco. I was there from 1995, just 19 years old. And I built my financial firm on the side, but I was associated with them for 23 years. And 95, it's around the time that you're just coming back from maternity, maybe a year later or something.
That's the year I joined Costco.
Oh, there you go. Boom. There we are. All of these little.
There's a tidbit. There's a tidbit the fives of people who are listening to this are going to be thrilled with, but yeah.
I'm okay with that. You know what? I don't care about the numbers. I'm just excited about this.
Okay.
But I think about when I started at Costco, And I remember there was one HR person, and at that time, I think the warehouse had maybe 200, maybe 220 employees. Now that same building has 450, and they've got 4 people in the HR department. And I literally watched this sort of industry grow. And Costco was so funny because, they'd have this one person, her name was Vicky, phenomenal person. She's still friends with my mother. I love Vicky. Shout out to Vicky Blue. And she literally was running, again, 200 and some odd employees. You got people coming and going, onboarding, offboarding. You've got pension plans. You've got all of these sorts of things. And they have one person doing it for so long. And then suddenly there's 3 people doing it, and suddenly you realize that this person was doing the job of 8 or 9 people. Was Pants like that? Because I imagine over the years, the job must have changed, evolved, and gotten a lot busier.
I mean, we never grew exponentially in the way that you described with Costco.
Yep.
Things in the world changed and certain responsibilities got added as years went on,
Yeah.
but they're mostly boring responsibilities. It was.
Are they?
Well, I mean, does anybody want to talk about the ADP payroll system and,
Okay.
changing 401k plan vendors and, dealing with benefits every year, and it's all the HRE stuff, which to me was the means to the end of making the employee experience as good as it can be. Can we
Yep.
have the best benefits for the money that we have? Can we get the best kind of 401k plan that will cost employees the least and will have the best services, all that sort of stuff that was all things that and then all the compliance stuff, which is the worst and most boring and trickiest, because anyone who works in HR knows they constantly change rules and every state is different and cities are different than states, and you have to keep up with all of it and all of that. So but that was all ancillary to what was really the most fun for me, and that was dealing with our interns and our employees, and just being that person that they could come to and talk to and know that I could be trusted to hold their information, set aside anything that you are legally obligated to report,
Yes.
but I'm talking about, like, people would come and say, I'm thinking about taking this other job, or I'm thinking about applying for this thing, or I'm thinking about this or that or whatever. And they knew that I would listen and talk to them and do whatever I could to give them some perspective on whatever it is they were trying to do and be supportive. And I think that the trick to any successful HR person is that you have to have the trust of both the employees and the management. And that is the key. And that's difficult because especially the bigger the organization, the less likely it is that you're going to have a relationship with human resources. They're kind of the people that are in a hallway somewhere far away that you go to if you get into trouble, so that's not at all what I aspire to be. Although I will say, and anyone who works on the show will still remember my extension, because that was like the running joke. If somebody made a joke or somebody did something, somebody said something to someone or whatever, it would be 5806. I'm calling 5806. I'm calling 5806 because that was my extension. And so that was always HR. And people still remember. Like, I'll see people and they'll be like, "You remember 5806?" So but that was always done in sort of loving jest.
For sure.
A couple of years ago, I did a walk with my son, my younger son, and we got our numbers, and our numbers were 5806 and 5807, which were my 2 numbers. And I had that up on my wall in my office for the longest time because that was very funny to me. But anyway.
That's fantastic. So what was the biggest employee count at Worldwide Pants?
It all depended on how you looked at it, because
okay. Let's include everybody. Let's include the interns. Let's include everybody.
I mean, I don't even remember. I mean, there were people that didn't count in my land at all because I didn't pay them.
Right.
So writers were paid differently. Anybody on the crew, they were all CBS employees. They were not Worldwide Pants employees, right? Yeah. Anyone who came in as a guest. Those people don't count to me. They're not employees. They came in and went.
Yep.
Actors who came in for a day. I
Yep.
didn't deal with those people either. Those were not employees. So, I mean, I couldn't even give you a number. Maybe it was 100. I mean, there are
Yep.
other people who might remember better than I would, or who would know the different categories of people. And we had different departments. So yeah, maybe it was 100 people. And the CBS pages, who then became Late Show pages, that was a whole other department.
Yep.
That had a lot of moving parts and multiple people. So, I don't even remember how many pages there were.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, it's been a while.
No, absolutely.
I had a whole other job after this job, so I don't remember.
Yeah, you went to the theater after this, and
I did. I worked in theater. It was great.
Yeah, and a non-for-profit too, which I really admire that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, the reason I asked that question though is because the HR jokes that people make, and you kind of alluded to that. I think most companies would say that, oh, we're going to HR, let's go talk to HR, like that. It becomes sort of a thing. But Rupert gets a knife pulled on him. Does HR have a headache the next day when something like that happens? Like, were there things that the show did, antics, things that happened on the show that would literally result in, okay, Janice has got an hour worth of work because of this the next day?
I don't remember that being my problem.
Okay.
Like, I mean, in terms of work, I don't remember them. There were other things that might happen. Stuff that happened on the air.
Yep.
Usually was not something that I had to worry about.
Okay. So let's talk about the differentiation of that then. So for example, someone makes a staffer's making an appearance on the show. You yourself did that. You were the wife many times
I was always somebody's wife. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Dave would sometimes get you up and play with that a little bit too, which I found very charming.
I don't even remember. Did he? I don't really remember. Oh, I don't really remember.
He's talking to the husband of the bit, whatever it is, whether it's asking a question or whatever. Oh, is this your wife? And gets you to stand up and say,
yeah. Well, that I got a line out of that day because I was not supposed to say anything. That was my Regis story. I think I might have told David Katz, but yeah.
Actually, that's a great story because it is a Regis story. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, anything. I mean, most of the things that I had to deal with are things that would not have happened on the air necessarily. Right. It was just your typical. I mean, I would not share examples of any issues that I had, but I don't. There were not a lot of things like that. I mean, yeah, were there. There was nothing that I think that you would know about that you would have seen, right?
It's all the regular HR stuff.
It's all the regular stuff.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any drama for you.
Yeah, no. And I'm not, and this show is a positive show anyway, but the idea that, again, we were doing a remote and some stuff happened that we didn't expect to happen. We put a bunch of bunny suits in the H&R block, and the guy, armbarred somebody and brought them out there. That was the question, and you answered it. Does any of that stuff ever end up on your
usually, I mean, I would know about it. And if there was someone who had, I would know about it, but I would not usually have to get involved in that. There were other people who would take care of any issues that might happen while they were on a remote, while something like that happened on a remote. It wouldn't be me.
Okay, I gotcha. And again, to go back to the payroll thing, using you as a prime example. Okay, so you actually did a bit on the show, you got a line in, that sort of a thing. The next day, are you having to process some special payment, some sort of different, do you have to report
somebody else did that.
Somebody else did
that. That was a different person. There were artist payroll, and then there was the regular staff payroll. And that was a whole other job that another person did, who paid the writers, the artists, if anybody appeared on the show and we had to get paid through the union. Somebody else did all that. I didn't deal with the artist payroll at all.
Was that a CBS employee or was that a Worldwide Pants employee?
It was a Worldwide Pants employee.
Oh, there we go. Okay, very cool. So, that's so you did have multiple people kind of doing HR type things. They just were demarcated through.
Yeah, that person that was a completely separate job that only dealt with the artists and the writers payroll because it was a lot of work. Particularly because every time somebody stepped on that stage and it aired, that's a different person you have to pay. And then I think that person also had to handle residual payments, like when reruns aired, they had to handle all of that stuff. That was a full-time gig. And I'm one person, like I could not have done that and done everything else. There's no way. That was completely separate.
Okay, this is the stuff that I'm fascinated by. You show up after maternity. Does that person already exist, or is that something that as you built the program, you realized?
No, that person already existed within the finance department because I was kind of part of the finance department actually. So no, that job already existed. I mean, I don't remember who, somebody was doing that job already. Yeah.
And was it the same person, just like you were on your side of things the whole time, or did it change a few times?
There was one person that was there most of the time. There was somebody else. That person, I can't even remember who was there before, for Liz. I don't remember who was there before her, but yeah, somebody else might have done that job and got promoted into doing something else. Like I don't, you're talking 20 years ago. I don't remember.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So that's good to know though. That's one of the things that people are, believe it or not, people are actually curious about this stuff.
I cannot believe anyone is curious about how the artist payroll worked, but okay.
Yeah, well, no, and I mean, we talk about how, okay, so this mug here, it's a mug that goes on the desk here, but then if it becomes into a bit, now it becomes a prop, and different people are now in charge of handling different things, and that's fascinating to outsiders. A lot of people don't understand that part, and this sort of has that on the business, the business end of things a little bit. I want to talk about the audience coordination, because we've had David Kay on here as a guest, and I mean, the audience machine of Late Show with David Letterman to me was an unbelievable mechanism of how that would go from everything from the way that you started with the postcards and all of that stuff to some of the ways, and then of course the indoctrination of the audience as they would come in. So the ticketing for that, obviously it became a department of its own, but at the same time, you, with your experience running the Page program at NBC, knowing how the audience stuff worked your first couple of years at Late Show, I assume that when you brought Pages on board and audience coordinators and people like that, you were able to give them some real insights as to how the show worked.
Okay, when I did that job, it was me. And
I can't even imagine, Janice. Like that is just, oh my God.
I think I might have had, I can't remember if I had one part-timer or two part-time people that worked with me.
Talk about drinking from a fire hose. That is unbelievable.
But I never had more than, I think there were always three of us. It was always me and two other people. And most of those people actually went on to have really great careers either at the show or outside of the show.
Yep.
But yeah, there were only three of us. And I remember when we first moved into the building, it was that July. So I was one of those people that was there while the construction was going on. Yep. And they had us in these little offices on the 6th floor. And there was a Ranch One chicken place next door, and the smell of the Ranch One chicken frying would like waft up through the offices. And there were only two, like from what I remember, it was me, and then it was some of the people from the finance department were across the hall. And so I remember getting in touch with somebody at CBS and some computer IT guy. And I said, this is what we need a computer to do in order to be able to record everyone's names and addresses, because at that time it was done by postcard. And so they came up with a computer system for us, and we sent the word out, and we started getting thousands of postcards and inputting them into a computer. And one thing that I do remember is we did a run, like Dave wanted to see what the theater felt like with people in it. And so we sent out these little postcards, and I used to have one. I don't know what ever happened to it, that said like this is not a show. We're just, we just want to see what the theater feels like.
Yep.
We just want to fill it up with people and see what it feels like. And I don't even think that the postcard said anything about Dave being there. It was just to test to see how it felt. And I remember like that being like a run through of getting bodies into those seats and seeing how it looked and how it felt. And then of course Dave came out and, people went nuts. And so
This is interesting. Okay. So this is interesting. So we're not talking about the shakedown shows beforehand. You're talking,
no.
There was
This
even
was
before that.
Before that, it was just, hey, and it
Wow.
was just these things, these cards, if my memory serves correctly, were only sent around like to people within a few block radius, like just a certain amount of them to whoever was, I don't even remember how it was done,
Yeah.
but I just remember the postcard that one of the producers I don't even think I wrote it. I think somebody else must have written it. I can't, I mean, again, this is stuff that happened in
93.
1993. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
So
This is the first time that's come up though. Like, cause we've talked about the shakedown shows on this show before. Because you bringing people in at that point, I mean, it must have still been a construction zone in some areas of the place like that.
no,
That's
I don't think so. I think it was right. It was probably right before. I can't remember what the timing was.
yeah.
If I could find that, if I still had that card, or if someone still had that card, it would say whatever the date was.
Yeah.
But it was just like, hey, we're new to the neighborhood. We just want to see what the theater, there's no show, just come in and say hello to the theater or something. So it was probably pretty much done.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of seeing how it felt. And Dave wanted to see how it felt before shows started getting done there. So, before the shakedown shows. So that's just a little piece of trivia that
I love it. And now we've just unleashed the idea that there is a collectible out there that hasn't necessarily been unearthed. Don Giller, do you have that? I know he doesn't have one of those.
Probably does. It was also printed. There was an Entertainment Weekly, an issue about that featured the new show coming.
Yeah.
And I feel like that postcard was in an article that they printed, because I think their offices were like right across the street from us or something at the time.
Yeah.
So I feel like they might have gotten a hold of one of those postcards and put it in,
Yeah, no, DC Comics is across the road from you guys.
Yeah.
And Shecky and I would talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
He spent quite a bit of time over at DC Comics over the years. I know. I miss him too.
Yeah. Oh, you have his picture. I just noticed that.
That was from it was funny. So Checky's niece came up to me and she said, like, she knew that he was a huge part of my life. And this show wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Rick. And after the memorial, when people were walking across the street to the bar after for the social, she handed it to me and she goes, "You'd like this, wouldn't you?" And I said, "Yes, I'd very much like that. Thank you very much." I said, "Please just do me one favor. Don't tell Kathy and Randy that you gave it to me. I want them to think I stole it." I miss him very, very much.
Yeah.
But he would tell me stories about how he would go across the street to DC Comics, and that was a big deal that those guys were there. And I think that what you're talking about is under the same umbrella. It's all the same publishing.
Yeah.
So you talk about working with CBS a little bit here. In your job, building the HR portfolio at Pants, how often would you have to deal with CBS, and did that go down over time as you kind of found your rhythm, or was dealing with that network always something that you did?
At the very beginning, I reached out to the person who was the head of HR at CBS. I forget whatever corporate, I guess it was. I don't remember. She was lovely.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because years before I had applied, her name was Linda Kalarchian, I think. And I had applied for a job at CBS, and I got one of those like thank you, but no thank you letters from her.
Yep.
And so now years later, I called her up and I said, "Listen, I'm starting this department. Do you have any advice for me?" And she was very helpful. And over the years, I would deal with her on occasion, but nothing, and if there was some issue that came up that involved someone at CBS or that CBS would have been involved in, then I might deal with people over there.
Yep.
But and if I said, oh, if I had a question about, hey, have you heard about this new, regulation or this new rule or this new law or something that was about New York City or New York State or whatever, maybe I would call them. I don't really remember doing that, but we ran pretty independently of them. It wasn't as if I had weekly meetings with the CBS HR people or anything like that. We were an independent company that, we were contracted to do these shows for them. So they were very helpful if I ever needed anything, or especially at the beginning. Linda was very nice and helpful, but there wasn't, a lot of day-to-day interaction just because we were sort of running parallel races.
Yeah. And so there was no, that's exactly it, because it's a unique situation like that. That doesn't really happen in that business. And I don't think it'll ever happen again. So it's one of the things that I think a lot of people are fascinated with is, okay, well, CBS, obviously, they wanted to have certain CBS personalities as features as guests on the show, but with you guys, there's a bit of a firewall when it came to that. And I'm just, because it was your show. It was you guys. One of the things that has been, and I mean, again, I don't tell tales out of school on this show, so that's not something we do. It's been publicized. Dave has talked about it, talked about the need. You alluded to it as well. You always wanted to be the best employer. Was that something when you came back from maternity and HR is developing, you're going to head it up? Did someone ever say to you, one of the producers or Dave himself even say to you, you know what, we want to be known as a good employer? Or was that just something that you just came into this thing with, knowing that, and that was a mark that you wanted to make sure you put on your tenure in that job?
I don't, again, now we're talking 27 years ago.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think I felt a responsibility having been given this, having been trusted to take this on, right? And being handed all of this responsibility to do the very best that I could and to figure it out. And really, I felt at the beginning that my role was to make everybody else's job easier. Now, you person over here, you don't have to worry about this anymore because now I'm taking care of that. And you person over there, I got handed the internship program. You don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm going to take care of that now. And so it was more about that in my mind. And then, I always enjoyed working with the pages themselves. And so having the opportunity to kind of repeat that, when I got that responsibility, and even when I worked in the audience department and the pages were CBS pages, like I loved working, whatever interactions I had with them and with the two people that I got to work with in our little audience department, that was always the most fun for me. So, I felt like my first mission was to make life easier for everybody who was able to hand off these little responsibilities to me. And then I felt a responsibility to the employees, as time went on. And you can only do that if you have support from the very top. So, to have the best health insurance you can have, and to offer what you can offer in your retirement plan, and the other benefits that we had and whatever else, I can't say, oh yeah, we're going to spend all this money on this thing. I had to get approval to do everything. And so there was a lot of support from the top to do that, to make, I don't think there was ever any goal to, we're going to be on some list of the top employers in the nation. It was just about doing what was right for the people that worked for us, and making, the fact that everybody worked super hard and super long hours and all that, hey, but you're going to have good health insurance, and you're going to have and I used to chase people down. If you talk to people and you ask them, did Janice make you join the 401k plan? I would chase you down the hallway and make you sign up. Because particularly there were a lot of young people who were just starting, and they were starting out at salaries that were not a ton of money. And they would think, when you're 24 years old or 23 years old, like, I don't have money. I don't know. That's 40 years away. And I would berate you until you put a little bit of money into that retirement plan. So
was there a match?
Yeah.
There you go. Always. Well, and that's
Right.
that's my gig now is, I have a financial firm, and whenever I've got a client sitting down with me and they're talking about, privately investing or whatever, okay, do you get anything at work? Take the free money. That's the
Right.
first piece of advice. You go and take the free money. We're going to get to that too. And by the way, in the intro, for you, for this episode, I talk about how important it is for you to build into others. And I can't wait to kind of get into that. And I want to finish the episode talking about that because I know how important it is for you. And that's another example of that. There are many people who work for companies, whatever level, and they don't have the HR person saying to them, "Hey, you make sure you sign up for this," and dragging them and giving them that life advice. That is all over. Your fingerprints of that and that attitude are all over. What has been your career, and other people talk about that, how much you care. Let's get to the pages. Let's get to this place. Amy, when she was on, talked about how before she became assistant to Jerry Foley, she was a page. She worked for CBS. You alluded to this. Why did it go from CBS pages to Worldwide Pants pages?
I think that's really a question for David Kay.
Okay.
But I think that they felt like if they were expanding this department now, when they hired David worked for a company. I'm sure he told you all this. He worked
Absolutely.
for this company, Audiences Unlimited, I think it was.
Yep.
And I think that it was just a feeling of, and I don't know if CBS at that point, how much other work there was for CBS pages, like that part, I don't know.
Yep.
But I think that there was just a feeling that, hey, we want to bring it all in house, and because they were expanding the department, they then had the wherewithal to hire pages directly and have them work directly for the show. So beyond that, I don't really remember, but I think that was just it. They just wanted, to be able to hire people directly. And then there was the ability to have enough staffers to physically do that, because I didn't get involved in the interviewing of the pages, because they did come and go with more frequency than regular employees might. But so they had people that, they had the department. I can't remember how many people worked in that department, but it was a lot more than 3 by the end. So it became a much bigger operation as the years went on.
There you go. And David Kay says the same thing. Like, these things grow and they expand and they change, evolve, all of that stuff. Okay, so you come back from maternity, you start building this page program. I want to get to the point where you're a little while into it and you've kind of got it down. Is there a season for it? Like, is it like, okay, I know that in August I'm going to be doing this and this and this and this because we're onboarding X amount of pages. I know that happens in August. It happens in 2 other times of the year. Or was it something that you did only once in part of the year? Like, how did it work that way?
Well, I never hired the pages. I hired the interns.
Sorry, that's right. I meant
interns.
To go interns. Sorry about that.
So yes, we had 3 semesters. We had fall, spring, and summer. And, it back then, I mean, there was like, it evolved technically over time, where it would be, I would call people up and make their times to come in and interview. And then, eventually we moved everything over to email, but there were 3 semesters, and it was quite an involved process because each candidate would come and meet with me, and then they would meet with everybody who had an intern on the staff. So they would go to the talent department, they would go to the research department, they would go to the writing department, the production department, the director's department, they would go to all the different departments. And then they would come back and talk to me, and I would ask them, okay, what did you like most? Was there one that was a favorite for you? What did you like least? Is there a place where I should not put you if you get selected? Because I didn't want to put someone in a department that they had no interest in, because that just doesn't work from either end. And once that process was finished, then I would go around and I would meet with each department and say, okay, research department, they got 2, I think maybe they had 3 interns. I can't remember now. I think maybe they had 3. And I would say, okay, who do you want your interns to be? And I would try to match them with interns who expressed interest in them. And I would tell them, oh, this person says no, they don't want to be in research. So we would try to match up candidates to departments. And sometimes there was a little bit of negotiation back and forth in terms of, there was always one candidate that everybody wanted. And so I would try, once I saw that happening, I would try to put that person in the place that they said they really wanted to be.
Right.
So then that would happen, and then we would get in touch with everybody. We would let the folks that were not getting selected know. We would, start the process of getting everybody ready to get to New York and come in and be an intern. And there was another entire involved process in onboarding them and in their orientation and in getting them trained and up to speed. And it was really fun for me to watch them grow up over time, and especially the ones that stayed on the show and ended up getting hired. It was really very rewarding to watch that process. And some interviews I remember as clear as if it happened yesterday. And there were so many of the interns that hold really special places in my heart. So that was the best part of that job.
I'm gonna get to that for sure. I'm gonna ask about some of it because I love how proud you are. Even again off camera a couple of times when an intern has said, "Oh, please say hi to Janice" or whatever, and Ty Rogers is the one that comes to mind right away. And I tell you, he how much he appreciates you and the advice that you gave him, and some other folks as well. Who are still Matt. He's in TV now, and he's like, I went to LA because of a heart-to-heart conversation that I had with Janice, and he's still to this day, he's a producer. I think it's on Top Chef now and whatnot. And he goes back to that conversation with you and talks about how pivotal it was. I love how you talk about it. So we're going to get into some people that ended up, the hiring from within culture is something that's fascinating to me. So I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I want to go back to this 3 semesters. So when were the semesters for the
It was fall, spring, and summer.
Okay. And different types of people for different semesters, always the same type of people for
okay, so summer was by far the most competitive semester. We would get upwards of 800 applications for summer.
Yep.
And
800.
we read,
okay.
Something along those lines, and we would read every single one. I would read every single one. I mean, we got to a point where I might have had someone else on the staff take a look at them, and anyone, if you're in high school, I don't have to read that resume, right?
Yep.
We were always, especially in the summer, looking for people who we knew were serious about television as a career. That was the first caveat.
Yep.
And I think anyone who is looking to get into that business now, when you want to be an intern on a big popular show, you want to have other experience. You want to show that I am serious about this, and I don't want to do it because it looks like a fun summer, right? It'll be a lot of fun because it's work, and I don't want that spot to go to somebody who isn't really serious about it. And look, there were people who came through and they were interns, and they decided once they had that experience, hey, this was fun, but not for me. And that's perfect.
Yep.
Because that's what you want to find out in an internship. You want to see, hey, does what it look like from the outside looking in the same as what it is on the inside looking out? And is that the life I want? And is that the kind of work I want to do? And I have to make sacrifices to do this work, because if you come from out of town, if you live somewhere else and now you have to move to New York or LA to pursue this career, is it that important to me? And that's fair. And so there were many interns who, came through and decided, I'm going to go to law school, or I'm going to go do something else, or I'm going to get into some other business. And that's exactly what you want to do, why you want to do an internship. But we would always look for candidates that had some other experience. So whether it was fall and spring were less competitive, and another little helpful hint for those kids, all those kids who are listening rapidly to this podcast.
Maybe the grandparents of those kids who can relay the advice. Yeah.
Anyway. If you can swing it, do it. Try to get an internship in the spring and the fall, because there are a lot of shows that aren't even around in the summer, or if they are, they're off a lot, right? They're on hiatuses. Even shows that run all year, they're off for a lot of the summers. So fall and spring, less competitive, because a lot of students are in school and they're far away and they can't do it. But if you can swing it, you may have a better chance. And there's more that happens too. There was just more that happened for us in the fall and in the spring.
Yeah.
So then the interns would get onboarded and sent off to their departments, and off we went every semester.
I love this. And again, we're going to get to the hiring within in a second here, but some of the people that ended up, having massive careers and still do have massive careers in television started out as an intern. Now, many of those people I've talked to, they came in as a super fan. And here's something that I'm very curious about. You obviously had to have a lot of super fans that wanted to do this. And there's an attitude, Chris Shakai and I talked about this at length when he was on, and how, he worshiped the show, worshiped it growing up. But when he got there and got into his position and whatnot, you almost have to quell that a little bit. You don't, it's cool that you work there, but you don't need to talk about it and how great it is and all of that kind of stuff. There's a bit of an attitude there. Would you ever see some of these people show up and say, okay, you're enthusiastic, that's great. Was part of the guiding that you did also said, okay, but you don't have to, don't advertise that you're a super fan like that. Did that ever hit your attitude hit you ever?
There was one person who interviewed who didn't get hired because there was a difference between being a super fan and then being being stalkerish, you know what I mean? And being like you couldn't.
I walk that line every day, Janice. No, I don't. I'm kidding.
Yeah. But you couldn't. It wouldn't be productive if you ran around asking for people's autographs and I want to take a picture with you and oh, I'm the biggest fan of this and you couldn't. That wasn't going to work. And if that was not something that that was sustainable, you were not going to be the right fit if you were too much of a fan. And it's so funny that so many of the people who have been so successful were big fans of the show.
Yes.
But when they interviewed and they would talk about, and again, these interviews happened years and years and years ago.
Sure.
I don't remember, people were able to speak knowledgeably about television, right? And about why they wanted to work on this show. And a lot of them would say that they really admired the show and that they really liked the comedy and they wanted to learn more about how it was done. And that was perfect. That was all well and good.
Yes.
If they had the experience that they might have gotten in school. Are you working at your campus TV station? Did you do an internship at your local radio station? And everybody had different abilities to do these kinds of things because that comes with some privilege, being, especially back then when internships were unpaid, not everybody could afford to do it. So any little experience that somebody else might have had, was very helpful. And there were some schools that were much better than others at allowing for those kinds of opportunities, particularly during semesters, that would encourage students to take internships and support them in some ways. And that was always helpful. But you could be a big fan as long as you had the experience to back that up. You know what I'm saying? Like a real interest. Like, hey, yeah, I really like this show because it's good television and because I'm interested in learning how to make good television. And that's the difference, I think, between just being a fan, right? And being a fan who wants to learn how it works because you want to be part of the next generation of whatever that kind of show might be.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting level of discernment that you have to have as these people are coming in. 800 resumes. And I mean, I don't know how many, would actually turn into, you dilute that down, how many interviews you would do and how many people would make it. Like, is it 50% of the interviews you did, you hired?
We tried to do twice as many. We only would do twice as many interviews as we would hire because more than that, there were two things. Becomes unsustainable, right? It's people don't have time to do all these interviews, but also that's more people being disappointed. I don't want to make you come all the way to New York and get the thing and you go around and and then we don't pick you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. And there was no reason to do that. Twice as many became a pretty good number. We would have people who would turn us down. We once had a girl who we hired, and on her first day, she doesn't show up, and I call her up. I'm like, "Where are you?" "Oh yeah, I changed my mind." It's like, what? So that happened on occasion. Um, but yeah, that was how we did it. It was about twice as many. So if we ended up, by the end, we had less than, maybe we had 8 or 10 interns. There was a point where maybe we had 13 or 15. And then sometimes then it became too many. You wanted the experience of the intern to be valuable. You wanted them to learn as much as they could.
Yep.
And we wanted them to walk away with something tangible they could then use for their future careers.
Right. And I want to make the distinction again. You had 13 interns at the height of it, kind of a thing.
Probably,
8
yeah,
was kind of the
maybe a
sweet
little,
spot.
maybe a little more. I still have the lists of everybody in every semester. I did keep that. But we averaged about 13, and then there came a time, when we decided we want to start paying interns. And when that happened, we reduced the number to, I forget what it was, maybe 8 or 9.
Yep.
Because we felt like, okay, now we can give them real responsibility, more responsibility. And so we reduced the number. I forget how many it was by the end, 8 or 9 or so. Yeah. Maybe 10. I don't know.
And again, a lot of people think that the interns were the people who were the audience coordinators. Well, they certainly weren't. The audience coordination with their own department, with their own staff, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Did that department have an intern?
I think they did. I think they did for some time.
Yep.
I feel like they did. I don't remember if they did. I don't know that they did toward the end. But for some period of time, there was an audience intern, I think.
All right, cool.
I should have done more homework before this.
No, gosh, are you kidding me? Not even a little bit. And if you need a break, you need to ask a Costco question. You ask it anytime you like.
I will. And I am going to have to go and get my cord because my computer's going to die shortly.
Oh, so you go get it anytime you want. You want to get it right now? You can.
Yeah, hold on. Can you hold on?
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Janice is going to get her cord. Let me see here. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only, and they still are our sponsor, damn it. And they're going to be our sponsor until he shuts the website down. Go to hello-deli.com and you can find Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. The only place that you can find officially licensed Late Show with David Letterman merchandise is at hello-deli.com. Rupert G, of course, packs every single one of it, whether it's a mug, whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a hat, whatever it is, Rupert G packs that with care. And the joke used to be, if you want, he'll add onions to that order if you ask him to. Well, he doesn't have the deli anymore, but he does have hello-deli.com. And you can go there at any time. And I would do it sooner than later because the holidays are around the corner. Go get yourself or your loved ones or yourself and your loved ones some Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. Go to hello-deli.com, the only sponsor of the Letterman podcast. Okay. There we go.
Sorry
While you
about
were gone,
that.
I did a commercial for our one and only sponsor of the Letterman podcast, which used to be the Hello Deli. Now it's not the Hello Deli anymore. Now it's just Hello. It's now just hello-deli.com because and this is here's a question for you. I don't know if you were involved in this or not. Again, talks about the little sweet things that I we say Dave and management would do. When when you guys closed up shop in 2015, Late Show with David Letterman merchandise licensing, he gave that to Rupert. And so you can still go to hello-deli.com. And that's the only place to get officially licensed Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. How sweet is that? So it's a broader point. How fun, how awesome was that event for Rupert that night? Wasn't that great?
It was really fun. We've had some reunions in the past few years. We had a couple at my house. We had Late Show pasta parties that we had at my house, but it was there were people there that I had not seen. There were people that, it was really fun to catch up with. And so, yeah, it was really nice. And Walter did a great job. He really did a great job. It was a lot of fun, and a nice send off for Rupert and me.
Yeah, it was so great. I'll tell you one of the things that that blew me away was there are quite a few people, more than I was prepared for, that had not been in the theater since May of 2015. And
Yeah, I'm one of them.
you're one of them. So
Mhm.
I don't think I asked you this question that night, but there were 4 or 5 others that I did. Was that weird for you? Because there was some interesting emotions. The nostalgic, some people there was some pain there, some people it was
Yeah.
heartwarming. There were a couple of tears. Because the theater itself was open. We were
Mhm.
transferring stuff from the deli in for beverages and things like that, and t-shirts and all that. So there was a point in the evening where there was like 15 or 20 people just sitting in the back row of the theater, just kind of looking around. Was it weird for you to go back there?
Um, yes and no. I didn't go into the theater, oddly. Like I poked my head in and I thought, all right, that's far enough. Uh, it was, so much has happened uh in in the years, since the show ended,
Yeah,
that it was easier than it would have been had that event happen a couple months after the show ended,
right.
because I was able to go on and have another great job at another wonderful place, and um it looks the same. The lobby anyway looked exactly the same, so it was very much like just coming home, and it was the same group of people who were there, so it was very much like any other thing we would have done in that lobby over the years. So um it I was not sad. I was sentimental a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think that my attitude about it is that I feel like I was lucky to have been a part of it. And like everything else in life, things end and you move on and you go on. And I I was happy that I was able to have been there for all those years. That show, that organization gave me a lot, and I am forever grateful for that. And so it was nice to be there with that group of people. I know there were some people who were really very emotional that night about it.
And again, I felt I felt honored to be part of that, to be in the room for that, seeing catharsis happen right literally in front of you. It was cool. It was mostly just joyful and happy and all this
Yeah.
stuff, but there were those little quiet reflection moments that people were taking, and I hope it was good. I hope it was good for them. And this has come out since I'm not telling tales out of school, but one of the things Rupert, I don't know if you knew this, Rupert refused the party at first, just like he refused the first time being part of the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And Walter said to him, he said, look, when we get together many times, it's because of something sad's happened. And he goes, this is something happy happening, and we would love to do a reunion for something that's happy. And Rupert immediately agreed, immediately said, yep,
Right.
okay, let's do it then.
Right.
And that's what it was. And he and Nancy and anybody who was a part of putting that event on, such a good job. You can go to the official Letterman YouTube channel, and they've got the video from that night on there. You can go watch it, everybody, and I highly recommend that you do. Did you ever eat at Rupert and May's? Did you ever eat at the deli? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you have some favorites?
There was no place that was more convenient than Rupert's. But yeah, of course I did. I mean, I would get the occasional sandwich and the soup and the, whatever the fare was that week. Sometimes he had specials, so you get whatever the special was. But yeah, I think, there were lots of places in the neighborhood that you could go, but no place was closer than Rupert's.
You got to see that neighborhood literally revitalize itself when you guys showed up there compared to what it was to what it is now. That must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, as the years went on, businesses came and went, and there were some businesses that were there for years that then went away during our tenure, and others that came along. Lots of different iterations of that little corner store, on the corner of 53rd and Broadway.
Yep.
It was different things. There was after Ranch left, then I can't remember what else came in. There was
The
then there was
CVS
a
store
burger
was there at
place.
one point. Remember the CVS
Yes,
store
the
was actually
CVS
there
store
for.
was there
Yep.
for a little while, but
Yep.
yeah, it but I've worked in different neighborhoods in the city, so everything changes.
Absolutely.
Things come and go. So what was around us, at the beginning, like McGee's was there, like
Yep.
right next to the right, and then that moved a few blocks away, and so the if any city that you work in, I think you're going to find that businesses are going to come and go. So yeah, it wasn't anything that I was like, oh, the card store is gone. Like it was a Hallmark store on Broadway. Like it must have been between 54th and 55th, maybe, or 55th and 56th. I forget. I was like, that Hallmark store went away. That was very upsetting to me. But anyway.
I was sad about McGee's. Let me tell you, this last trip, I was sad about McGee's because it's closed now. And after talking to Carter and Craig and realizing how much of in How I Met Your Mother, how much of the bar in that was inspired by the times that you would all have there. The night before Rupert's party, we're out with Rupert and Irene, and we ended up going to Serafina. It was great, but before Rupert was like, "Let's go to McGee's." And I was like, yes, let's go to McGee's. And we went there and it was papered up, unfortunately. Yeah, that was a real kick in the nuts. I was sad about that.
Yeah.
Did you spend very much time in the theater for broadcasts? I mean, obviously with the ticketing, with the audience stuff, you would have, but when you were in HR, did you see a lot of shows live?
No, we all had TVs in our offices and I would watch it on the feed.
Yeah.
But unless you had a reason to be down there, you weren't down there. You weren't just hanging around like the back of the theater or backstage. There was too much to do and people had work to do. And so there was no reason to be down there. I will say that one of the really nice perks of working there was being able to go to music rehearsals. And so some band would come or Broadway show would come and you'd be able to go down and sit and watch. There I'd be like plugging away, putting in, everybody's 401k contributions or whatever I was doing. And then, oh, look, West Side Story is here or Cinderella is here. Let me go down and sit for a few minutes and watch them rehearse. And that was always a lot of fun and very interesting. So that was something that was really nice to be able to do.
Any highlights that come to mind of those musical,
oh gosh,
your day that you had?
I got to see, I'm trying to think, Beyonce,
Carrie Underwood, there's one.
And then of course and Bon Jovi.
Wow.
Played outside. They were on the show a couple different times. Oh God, I can't even remember. Broadway shows, West Side Story, as I said, Cinderella, as I said, there were some others. Those were always really fun because you got to see those people who were so talented. First of all, watch how they block a performance for our stage versus whatever stage they were on, and make determinations as to how we're going to set this up, right? What is the blocking going to be?
Yep.
And then to watch these people who I so admired, all these Broadway theater people, be excited to be on the show. It was always fun too, when there was downtime, and if I got to be down there for longer than a few minutes, they would come and sit and you could tell that they were really happy to have the opportunity to be on. So that was fun. I mean, there were so many music rehearsals that I saw, I can't even begin to remember them all, but I will say that the last show, that famous Foo Fighters number, we hired like anybody who could lift stuff. We're like, come lift stuff and we will pay you. So my older son and one of his friends came to lift stuff and move stuff and box stuff. And I said to them, you're going to sit and you're going to watch this rehearsal. Like, this is a once in a lifetime thing. And we watched that last music rehearsal.
And you guys saw it with the montage when it worked, because in the
When
rehearsal,
it
worked perfectly in the rehearsal.
Yep.
And,
it worked.
What a gift.
Yeah. And then of course, Darling Love every year. Darling Love became, I'm sure other people have talked about that tradition.
Very much so. Yep.
And that was always like it wasn't Christmas until you went down, and really like most of the staff would guess, anybody who could went down and watched that music rehearsal. It became a Christmas tradition on the show, which I'm sure other people have talked about, but
very much
was,
so.
Yeah.
We've got some snow from the final performance, actually.
You do?
From Glenn Borders.
You know what I just gave away, that if I knew you had all this stuff.
There's actual snow from the.
And who gave you that?
This one here, Marilyn Sargent gave me this. Marilyn Sargent, I don't know if you remember or not, but there was a gal who at the very last Darlene Love show, and you might have seen this during the Q&A, she wrote a poem. Twas my Night at the Late Show. And she actually did a poem every single year. Twas the night before Christmas, and did the whole thing. She actually read it to Dave. Dave brought it on stage, and he actually made her part of that show a little bit. And so afterwards, she went and collected a bunch of the snow that Glenn Borders and his team did. And so
you got a little bit of that.
He sent some to me, so that was a very sweet thing. What did you just give away? I heard you saying that.
I had to do a big purge of a bunch of stuff, and every year there's a charity book fair that they do in our town, and there was a prop book. I don't know why I had it, but it was like the cover was something that the book was really about dogs, like the actual book. Yeah. But it was a dummy cover with something about Dave and a kitty. I don't know why I had this book. I don't know how I ended up with it, but I put it in the pile to donate, and I thought somebody at this book fair is going to think they're getting a book about Dave and cats, and they're going to open up, and it's like how to train your puppy. So
that's charming.
Mike. I gave it. I donated it because
that is amazing. Like I would love to have had that book, but I actually really love the idea that perhaps, just maybe, somebody who who's a fan of the show or whatever, or realizes that they have an actual prop book from one of David Letterman's bits, and it's sitting in a book fair somewhere. It's sitting in a thrift shop.
Wait,
somewhere.
You froze for a sec there. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I would have loved to have had that book, but even more so, I love the idea that book is sitting in a thrift shop somewhere, and then somebody could end up realizing they have a David Letterman bit. That's really, really cool.
We do it's a fundraiser that the town does every year. And people, or like everybody in the town, donates whatever books they have read, they don't need anymore. And then you go and you buy a bag of books for whatever. So, yeah. So I don't know what happened to it, but I like to think that that's what,
Off camera, we talked about how, you've got two of the original Ed Sullivan seats down in the basement. Do you have anything else? Did you keep any of the jackets? Did you keep? Were you in charge of the jackets? Like, did you give the jackets out every year? Or?
No. I was not in charge. Dave had his staff did that.
Okay.
No, I was not in charge of jackets. I was just the lucky recipient of jackets. But I have so many jackets. They're in bins, and some of them I wear. Some of them, like some years I would, because I was there for many years, and then Dave was nice enough, like they would give jackets to our kids. So I had kid jackets in different sizes.
Oh my gosh.
So
I have a granddaughter. If ever you want to get rid of a kid jacket, you let me know.
All right, I'll look. Because okay. I some of them, as the kids outgrew them, I would give them to other family members or friends with littler kids or whatever. Yeah. But I might have a kid jacket somewhere.
Oh man, that'd be cool. I've got 8 of them so far.
You have 8 jackets?
So far, yeah. When George Schweitzer was on, I don't know if you remember George Schweitzer. He worked for CBS. He was the marketing guy. And he found out I liked them so much. I told him I had told him that the thank you and goodnight jacket to me is just I love it so much. And when I got that thing, I told him if there was a fire in my house, that's the one thing I'm grabbing as I'm on my way out. And he thought that was really funny. And a few days later, I got a box on my porch, and he had 3 of them that he had never worn that he sent. So yeah, I love that tradition. I love the tradition of gift giving within the staff. We've talked about that on the show a little bit, how different staff members would have different things as gifts, but the jackets was really, really cool. So you have jackets, you've got bins full of jackets, you've got those seats.
Some of them I wear. There's a couple of them that I wear, but some of them were just like, they were either too big or like, and my husband has a few of them. But yeah, I have the seats. I have a bunch of shirts. I have a lot of shirts and sweat jackets. I mean, I was there forever.
Yeah.
So, and so I have like a lot of that stuff. stuff. There's a Live with Letterman shirt that I have that I particularly like, that actually my son had for a bit, and I got it back from him.
Oh, that warms my heart. I love that.
Yeah.
That Foo Fighters shirt is incredible. Do you still have the Foo Fighters shirt?
I think I do. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
fantastic. I love that.
Yeah,
shirt.
it's in a drawer right over here. Yeah.
That's outstanding. I love hearing
Yeah.
that. I could do show and tell shows. We're gonna have Jeremy Weiner back on the show. He's got a box of stuff that was like used on the show, including like one of the items that he knows that's in the box is a pencil that went up on the space station and came back down again. It was a one of your late show pencils that I don't know if it was the double ender or not, but it was one of the ones that went to space. And so he's gonna come.
Wait, you froze again, so I didn't hear that.
So okay, Jeremy Weiner is gonna come on the show, and we're gonna do a show and tell show. He's got a box that is all stuff that was on the show. There's only one thing that he knows that's in the box, and it's one of the late show pencils that went to space and came back.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And he's gonna come on the show, and he's gonna open that box for the first time in 10 years or whatever it is, and we're gonna go through stuff together. That's gonna be
that's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
I appreciate your time here so much. There's two other areas I want to hit here, other than, of course, any Costco questions that you have. The one area I want to go back to is, you've done such a good job just being you, Janice, showing how much you care, and I love that about you. And I know the pride that you take in these people. So there are people that you brought in as an intern that ended up doing some pretty amazing things. Brian Teta is the one that I always say I wish I could live vicariously. I did live vicariously through Brian, knowing that he came on as an intern and had all of these amazing experiences, becoming a segment producer and then going up, and now he's running The View, for crying out loud. Unbelievable. Who are some of the people that you hired, you brought them on, you saw something in them, they made the cut, and then they've gone on to some things that you're just so proud of? And I know it's like trying to pick kids. I get it.
No, I can't. They know who they are. They know, because I can't say. There are a few people that they absolutely know who they are, that I am in touch with. There are some people who have gone on and lived their lives, and they've done whatever they've done, and they've done great things. And then there are others that I keep in touch with. There's one former intern / staffer. We were texting last night. We were watching a TV show at the same time and texting about the show. That's our little tradition. But I can't just pick out a few, because then others will say, well, what about me? But they know who they are. They know who they are.
I appreciate that. So we'll make it a broader question. You guys in particular had a hire from within mentality that I just am so grateful for, because again, I think with your show, that production, I think that as the audience, so many of us wanted to be part of the club. And being part of the club is like, there's Pat Farmer, there's again Brian Teta, doing whatever things that he does, all of these different, Joe Grossman, all of these different people who were a part of the show that were actual staffers, and many of these people were given shots that, in my opinion, would not have been given shots if they were in the network system doing the position that they do. I look at Barbara Gaines, where she came from. She ended up being the executive producer of the whole damn thing. Like, was the hire from within mentality cognizant, or was it something that you just all did because it was a family and you were kind of off on your own?
It made sense, because you would come in as an intern, and sometimes we hired people who had been pagers too.
Sure.
But you already understood the culture, because every organization, as you know, I'm sure there's a Costco culture I want to hear all about.
Yeah.
Every organization has a culture, and some, if you enjoyed being a part of that culture, and you liked the job that you were doing as an intern, and we always looked at interns who were hardworking and who were nice, and who were interested, and who were enthusiastic, and who got it. who just got it. I guess that's the phrase. And you didn't have to go to a fancy school to be successful as an intern or on the staff. And as a matter of fact, I made it a point to always try to bring in interns who were from state schools or who were from local schools, or who, this is going to be an opportunity that is going to mean a lot to them. And so it just made sense, when you're hiring for an entry-level position, it made sense to be able to say to somebody, hey, you've done a great job as an intern, now this position is opening up, and people would apply for it, and whoever the hiring person would think was the best candidate would get that job. And so it just seemed fair. It seemed like the fair thing to do, to be able to work your way up. And sometimes people would go away and come back. They might have a job on the show. And the one thing I will say is that it wasn't the easiest place to continue to move up, because the people who were at the top, where are they going? Nobody's going anywhere. You're working at the best show on television in that genre. Where are you going? Yeah. So it became hard to kind of continue to move up a ladder. Somebody else had to leave in order for a job to be filled. So sometimes people would leave, and sometimes they would come back when an opportunity that now their experience really fit with opened up. So it was something that, and sometimes we hired people from outside. Like we might, if we needed something very specific, we might look to outside of our little universe. But it mostly just made sense to give a shot to people who had invested their time with this show, and who got it, and who liked it, and who wanted to further their career there.
Yeah. And it's funny. I think I recognized the hire from within because Costco had the same thing. I ended up, I stayed as long with Costco as long as I could, because, I really appreciated the culture. They had that hire from I was a corporate trainer, for a while, for a long while. And I wouldn't have been given that position, if they didn't have that hire from within mentality. They would have easily brought in all these sharks from outside and done that, but they wanted to create a culture where people got it and they understood it. There was a culture that the Costco culture, it was something that was very, very important. Mm-hmm. And it was cognizant for them. It was part of mission statement. It was part of, they wanted their store managers to be somebody who at some point had packed groceries, because they had a better understanding of what it meant all the way along the way, all the way up. Right. And I think maybe I recognized that with Late Show, which is why I asked about that. Certainly part of the secret sauce is having somebody in the place that cares as much as you do. One of the things I know that you love is building into others and giving. I mean, you've been an example of it already on this show multiple times, but I want to actually hit the topic head on. Janice, you love empowering people. You love building into people. It's something that it lights your fire. Is that from NBC? Were you good at running the NBC page program because you just intrinsically had that? Is that something that developed along the way, where you made somebody's day, or you made somebody, think about life in a broader perspective? It gave you joy, and so you just kept going down that path. Were you like that in high school?
I don't know that I was like that in high school. I think I started managing people when I was pretty young. I was 24 when I was promoted into being the manager of advertising and promotion at WMBC. And I had like one person. And that one actually at one point I might have had one person and a part-timer, but I had one full-time person. And when I hired her, she then became my best friend. And we are still really close friends to this day.
What's her first name?
Her first name is Lori.
Shout out to Lori, right on.
And so I just thought that was sort of an anomaly, that I happened to meet, this person and see something in her and hire her, and she and I became really close friends.
Yep.
But when I had the opportunity then to work with the page program, it just was something that made me happy to be able to do. And I was thrust into it, I didn't go to management training. To this day, I don't know why I got hired for that job, but I did. And they like, okay, here you go. You have a staff of like, 2 people, and now you have a staff, there were 6 people that, were department level people and all these pages.
Yeah.
And so I just got thrown into that. And I really just liked being able to be someone that people could come to and talk to, and hopefully I could help them. That made all the bureaucratic stuff that you had to do with that job so much better. I just liked, being around people who were interesting and enthusiastic about the job they had, and you were eager to learn stuff, and so it was just fun. And then the same thing when I got to Letterman, my philosophy kind of always was like, you want, if you're going to be a manager, and I'm sure you must have been a manager to other people, you want the people that you manage to want to do well because they want to have that reflected back on them from you. You know what I mean?
Yes,
And
very much so.
so that was always sort of my philosophy with that. But I don't know. I just really like to do that. It's just fun for me. I mean, that's the one thing about about now being retired that that I miss. I certainly do not worry about, when we have to file our Medicare numbers for the year, or worry about open enrollment or any of that stuff. But the ability to leave a little bit of a mark on somebody's life is very satisfying. And I hope that, that I have been able to do that.
So let's do that right now, because I don't know if you watch My Next Guest, Dave's Netflix program or not, but one of the things that in one of the episodes he had former President Obama on, and at the very end of the show he said, hey, let's talk about some of the folks that are out there. Let's sprinkle some of the dust. Let's talk about some of the things that maybe have helped a little bit. You are really good at that. I would love if you wouldn't mind, from your unique position in hiring history, but in show business. And people come along and they don't know what they're doing. They don't even know what they necessarily want. I think you've done a really good job of saying to people, hey, do you know what you want? Try and identify these things. And if you can immerse yourself in that, that's what this show is for me. I get so much joy because this, I feel, is my life calling. I love my helping people in my financial business. It's great. But this here, I don't get any money for this. I don't care. I love it. And I mean, so you've given that advice already that has had the hairs on my neck stand up a couple times. I know you have other things out there for people who are just searching, maybe aimlessly. Let's aim them a little bit. What are some pieces of advice you have?
Well, first piece of advice, while you're still in school, if you're young enough to still be in school, I fell into a bunch of stuff that happened to me. I didn't aim to work in television necessarily. I was a communications major, and I thought I was going to be like a magazine writer, right? That's what I thought when I went into college, right? Who really knows?
That's right.
And I ended up interning at 2 different radio stations only because a girlfriend of mine was a year ahead in school, and she was interning at these places, and she was like, you should try that, it'd be fun. And because I went to school, I grew up in Maspeth, Queens, right? And I went to St. John's University, so I was a commuter. So I had the ability to be able to go into the city a couple of days a week and do these internships. And so I fell into both of them. And the one thing I will say is I did particularly at WNBC, I did a really good job. I tried really hard, and they hired me, as the audience, the promotion coordinator, and then 2 years later promoted to be a manager. And so I was running a department at 24. I don't know how this is good advice for anybody else, but I can only speak from my own experience. I will say that for me, it was the ability to like doing different things, right? For some people, like my dentist knew she wanted to be a dentist from the time she was 5 years old. And I like her because if I'm going to go to a dentist, I want somebody who really loves being a dentist, right?
Yes.
They're not a dentist because their parents made them be a dentist.
Yes.
You're going to be poking around in my mouth. I want you to love being a dentist. But she always knew that that's what she wanted. I found that really fascinating when I first met her.
Yep.
but for a lot of people, they kind of meander. And, I'll give you a recent example of someone who has nothing to do with television or work.
Yeah.
But this person was like, was really good at customer service, was really good at dealing with other people, right? Really good at making a person in a customer service situation feel like, okay, you've helped me.
Yeah.
And because of the pandemic, had a difficult time and worked this customer service job and wanted to do something else and tried something else, but didn't really gel. And I said to them, well, but you're really good at computers. Like, you're really good at this thing, right? Like, pursue something maybe in the IT world, which was not something that this person had really thought too much about, like, oh, doing this for a living.
Yeah.
And now that's what they are pursuing. So if you can find something that you like, that you can, there are some people who are going to say, well, if you find what you love, you'll make money at it. And maybe that's true. But you have to find something that you love that you could make money at. And if
Yeah.
and there's also nothing wrong with trying different things. I think especially these days, it's okay to pivot. I mean, I pivoted a bunch of times just because that's where fate took me. That's where opportunity took me. So I didn't pretend that I had to be one thing.
I was going to say, you had an open mind. I think that's the piece of advice, is you had an open mind to be open to falling into something that you ended up liking. But many times people are too close to that.
Right. And I was lucky because the one thing I will say is that there was a period of time after the show ended and before I started at Roundabout that I worked for this HR consultant. And so I worked for her, and she had clients, and I would go to these networking meetings with all these different business people. And I thought, oh my God, these people, they love what they do, but it's so boring. Look at this widget. It's fantastic. It's the best widget ever made. And I'm like, oh. So I knew I had to get back into some semblance of show business, right?
Yeah.
Like, I knew that was something that I really liked being a part of, even if it's just like on the fringes. I'm not standing on a stage or directing people on a stage or any of that, but that industry was most interesting to me. And the other thing I will say is that within an industry, there are many different things you can do. So you don't, a lot of people say, I want to be a television writer, for example, right?
Yep.
That's a hard job. And if you can do something that's adjacent, that will make you happy, where you can write, but you don't have that same pressure of being that comedy writer, or that film writer, or that, well, maybe you can do that and be just as happy as the thing that you thought you wanted, because it seems the sexiest and the most glamorous.
Yes.
Are sometimes the most difficult. So, you have to kind of keep an open mind. And the other thing I will say is, be a good worker, be on time, be enthusiastic and pleasant and happy, and don't burn bridges, when sometimes things don't work out and you want to move on, or everybody gets laid off sooner or later. You get laid off. You never want to burn that bridge, because I will tell you that people that I worked with 30 years ago, I was able to go back to and get opportunities through, because they remembered that I, did a good job and tried hard and was pleasant and all of those things. So
wasn't Lori or Kathy or one of the people looking for you? Like,
well,
didn't they try and find you because you?
Well, what happened was, when I left NBC and I was working at a radio syndication company.
Yeah.
It was Lori who called me one day, and found and just to say hello, and we miss you and what are you doing? And that's when I said to her, like, oh, what are you doing about your audiences? And like, are you gonna have CBS do it? And she said, I don't know, you should talk to somebody else. And that's what started that. So but the fact that I, that
two things there. There's your attitude. That's why you got the call in the first place. And the second is, don't be afraid to ask for what you want sometimes either. You could have easily had a pleasant conversation with her and said, okay, talk to you later. But no, you actually.
Right. I pursued that opportunity.
Yeah.
And it worked out because they needed somebody in that role, and they knew me, and it just worked out. But had I not been very nice, or had I, they would never have even considered hiring me. So that's the one thing that I will say. I mean, you don't ever want to be in work situations that are unhealthy or abusive or any of those kinds of things, and so I'm not suggesting that anyone, suck it up and do that, but I'm just saying that in general, in the work world, you always want to put your best foot forward and be a little patient too. I think there's a tendency now, there's not a lot of patience, and you want to be a little patient.
Oh, I love that too. Yeah, I think that's a very good. I remember, I'm a Gen Xer growing up. I remember my parents calling my generation an entitled generation, and now having kids and grandkids and all that, you kind of see that, and impatience, I think, and entitlement can sometimes be synonymous with each other. I think that's, you don't be afraid to go pay some dues, and I don't think when you know where you want to go, or you see a goal, I think paying dues is easier, and I think that's part of it too. If you get to know what your goal is, it's paying dues is a lot easier. I read a personal development book lately, and it reminds me of something that you just said. There's two things that we actually can control: our attitude and our activity. And you can decide to be enthusiastic if you want to. You can decide to want to be there, and to roll your sleeves up and make your activity something that's worthwhile. Make that decision. It gets noticed by people like yourself.
Right. And sometimes you have to pretend. Sometimes you don't feel like it, but you do it anyway, right?
Yep.
Everybody has days where they just don't feel like it, and you do it anyway. And I'm not suggesting that people have to, skip around the office all day long, but you want to at least pretend that you're interested in what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's easier when you have that clear goal in mind. If you want to be a doctor, you know that there are certain steps that you have to take, right?
Yes.
But when you want to work in many other industries, there's no clear path. And I think it's easy to get frustrated as you're not moving up as fast as you think that you should.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think you've come full circle in what you just said there too, because I think that's a clue. If you don't want to be there the majority of the time, most of the time,
Right.
all of the time,
Right.
then have that ambition to find the place that you do want to be, and take the steps to do that, because life is too short, and it doesn't matter that the paychecks and things like that. If you're miserable, that doesn't help, and go and find the place that you do want to be.
I think that's the hardest thing, though, because I think it's really hard for people to, sometimes you fall into jobs that pay decently, and now you have benefits, and
Yep.
you're not really happy, but what do I do? Because now I have all this responsibility, and it's hard. Um, and I can see why there are lots of people who are not particularly thrilled with where their careers have taken them, because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. For some people are lucky. You're lucky if you know that there's something that you like to do, and you're lucky if you're happy doing lots of different kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's not always easy to find your thing, but you want to try to do that as best you can, and the more open you are to being happy doing different kinds of things, then the easier that goal will be to reach.
If there was one thing that, and this, I might be putting you on the spot on this one too much, but if there was one common trait that you saw in somebody who was applying for something that appealed to you, what would that be? Is it enthusiasm? That you've mentioned that word a couple of times.
It's the ability in an interview to be yourself, I think, is important. The ability to talk about yourself as a human, like there are a lot of things in an interview you're not allowed to ask, right? So
Yeah.
When you're interviewing anybody, no matter what the role, and I've interviewed a lot of people for different kinds of jobs over all these years.
Yep.
You want to get a sense of that person, that, hey, okay, this person brings the skills, right? So let's take the skills part out of it, because typically you when you're interviewing someone what their skills are, it's on that resume.
Yep.
But you want to be prepared. You want to know a little bit about the organization. You want to ask questions that are good questions. You want to be able to talk about mistakes or failures that you've had in a way that shows the interviewer that you have learned from that mistake. That's a typical interview question. What's the biggest mistake you made, or what's a recent mistake you made, or what is something you might change? And you want to think about what you would say in those scenarios when you're in an interview. I would always ask, what if I spoke to a former supervisor of yours and I asked them to describe you to me in a few words, what would they say? And that was very telling, because that question goes to, what do you think other people think about you, right? In a work situation. And then I would ask, where would they say you need to improve? And that also was very telling, because everybody has areas where they have to improve. And if you couldn't think of one, or if your improvement was so, well, I was late every day, somebody says something like that.
If it's egregious. Yeah.
So I think that and every job is different. For different jobs, you're looking for different, there's not one blanket thing like, oh, if you do this, that will happen. It's more, I think, just about being able to be yourself and articulate that in a way that makes you the most attractive candidate. And also know that sometimes you don't get jobs for, like, most of the time, it's not your fault. It's not that you did something wrong. It's that somebody else did something that was more right, or somebody else had a little bit more experience, or somebody else, it's about it's like grading on a curve. It's really about the somebody else. It's not usually, about you. So I know for a lot of people, interviewing is difficult and intimidating, and practicing it is helpful. And going on lots of interviews, like, take an interview. If somebody's willing to interview you, go to that meeting, even though if it's a job you might not really want, where you think you don't want, you might want that job by the time you get finished with that conversation. But it's also practice. I will also say, and if I'm droning on too long, Mike, stop me.
Not even a little bit. No.
One of the things that I told everybody, that I still tell everyone, is informational interviewing is so important, and there's a way to do it that is that will get you through the door. So, for example, if I said to you, Mike, I really want to work in financial services, can you help me get a job at your company? You would probably say, no, I don't know how to do that, or I can't do that, or no, I can't, right? But if I said to you, Mike, I'm really interested in learning more about financial services, can you spare 20 minutes to tell me a little bit about your career and how you got there and what you do and how you got your job? Well, right there, people love talking about themselves, right? And the idea behind doing that is that I meet with you, Mike, and you tell me all about your financial services, and you tell me all about Costco. And I'm like, Costco? Oh, is there anybody at Costco that I would love to learn more about that organization, that I could talk to there, that might be a friend of yours, that might be able to help me? And you build a network that way, particularly if you're trying to move around within the show business world. It's really all about the connections that you make, and the people you have worked with, and the reputation you build. Your reputation is so important, because even today, there are people who have worked on our show who are now scattered around the world in all different facets of show business. And someone will say, oh, you worked at this place. Okay, well, now our friend works at that place. I'm going to call that person up and say, hey, how did this person do? Right. So you want to make sure that your reputation precedes you, but it's also important to build that network, because after I have that conversation with you about Costco, right? And 3 months later, I see a job opening at Costco. Now I can call you up and say, Mike, I see this job is open. Do you have any advice for me on how I should apply? Is there someone in particular? What do they like to see? And that's how then people like to be helpful. But in a networking situation, lots of times they don't know how. So that's a way. You've done all the work. You're just asking for their advice once again. And the more you build up that network, the better chance it's going to be that somewhere along the way, one of those people will be able to actually help you get to whatever your next job is.
I love that you do this, and you can articulate this so well. I believe that there is a place for you to speak to groups of people about this. I believe that you are nothing short of an expert in this category. I'm grateful for that. And I'll just add this one thing before I get to the last question I have for you. Is it's reciprocal too, because if you have that meeting with me, and if I go on and I see, hey, this is happening at this other warehouse. Maybe if I find out in the Vancouver warehouse they're hiring somebody, I've had that meaningful conversation and dialogue with you. Maybe I call you back and say, hey, Janice, by the way, there's an opportunity over here. So it's not just you seeing it, it's other people
Right.
seeing it. That's that relationship skill.
Right.
Relationships are extremely important to me as well.
Mhm.
I could not agree more. I'm thank you for taking some time to talk about that. I know it stokes your fire, and so it's very easy for you.
Mhm.
And again, the advice is nothing short of expert. I want to talk about the finish of the show and the finish of Worldwide Pants in the incarnation that it was in 2015. For those, again, I'm a broken record who haven't read the book, The Last Days of Letterman. The final 6 weeks of that show were absolutely incredible, from a viewer standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. I want to go to, how was it for you shutting the thing down? Because that must have been a very interesting perspective that you have that many people just don't have otherwise. Were you pushed out the next day like so many others? Were you allowed to stay there for a few weeks? How did that work with you?
There was a group of us that stayed on until I think it was the beginning of August to wrap. And
That's 3
uh,
full months, like June, July. Like that's
yeah,
a
no, it was
while.
June and July. It was two.
Yeah.
It was really, it was, yeah, because it was the show ended at sort of end of May. So it
Oh yeah,
was
that's right.
all
Okay.
of
Yeah.
June, all of
Yep.
July. I
Yep.
think we left right at the beginning of August. And then because all of it, because remember, just because the show ended, there were still things that had to happen
Yes.
even after we were gone. And so there was a whatever company um, Dave used, Worldwide Pants hired to kind of take over what was left, like the business management side of things.
Yep.
So there was a business management company that we handed whatever was left off to. So,
Okay.
things like people were on Cobra and everybody's 401k money and like all
Yep.
of that stuff and plus a lot, whatever else there might have been that was not within bills that had to be paid, whatever it was. Like I had my little piece of it, but we, I remember, like, it was so weird because we were on the 8th floor of the building, right? And so we were a little bit separated from the production floors.
Yep.
So, the last show happens. The next day, we come into work and everybody is like packing up their stuff and moving it out. And the set is on the street. And, I'm looking out my window and I'm like, I can't, like, they're just destroying the whole thing and throwing it away.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh.
and that was, I think that was a Thursday or a Friday. And then Monday, when we came back to work, and I was still kind of doing stuff because we were processing all this paperwork and we were, getting all these things wrapped up, and it took a little while. So, and then I remember, like, going up to 11 and 12 while they were doing the construction and seeing how, like, all the offices were ripped up. I was like, I can't even be up here. Like, I can't
Yeah.
even be up here. Like, I can't do this. So it was a little odd to be there when everybody was gone. It was just like delaying the inevitable. But it was sort of a little bit of a transition too, because unlike everybody else, who one day you're in the throes of doing this show and it's so emotional and it's so, it's so much, and then it's over and you're out.
Yep.
There was a little group of us that had a little bit more time to kind of, finish things up and get things done and get our stuff and be on our way. So so in that way, it made that transition maybe a little easier, because by the time we were done, it was like, well, this isn't the place anymore.
Yeah.
This isn't that place, because there's a little group of us that are here, but none of the rest of the people are here. Like, nobody's here, it's done.
Yeah.
So I felt like more ready to kind of move on and go on to the next thing.
Very well said. And it's nice to have the little PS that we talked about that happened in the lobby a few weeks ago. Where everything was still the same, and then there's this one little place where you all could get together and it could take you back to that moment again. I'm really, really grateful that you finally succumbed to the pestering that I gave you to come on this show.
And succumb is the right word, because
I know.
yeah,
I know.
I
Respectful. I was respectful about it, though.
Yes, I know you are. I still don't believe that anyone will care, but you'll
all
let
that
me
matters
know.
is that I do. I've had a ball with this, Janice. Like, I really, really have. And again, I want to go back. There's going to be people who were there's quite a few staffers who actually watch or listen to this show. And there's going to be a lot of people very delighted that you're here, just to hear your voice, just to know that I'm I'm not making it up when I say you are probably the most loved person that has been referred to by these staffers. They all love you. They all appreciate you. These interns that are doing different things around the world, all, have talked to me about the impact that you made on them from your very first meeting on. They talk about flying to New York so they could meet with you and the onboarding and all of that stuff. They still remember this stuff decades later. So thank you for being you. Thank you for caring as much as you do. And thank you for succumbing. Thank you for coming on the Letterman podcast, Janice. I really appreciate you.
You're very welcome, Mike. And to any former interns who are who are watching this, or who you meet with later, I send my love. I say hello. They can get in touch with me. I would love to hear from them, and see how everybody, the ones that I'm not in touch with all the time, because there are a group that I am. But those that have gone on their way, I'd love to hear from them and see how they're doing. But
that's good to know, and we'll facilitate that when it happens. I'll do a quick outro here, and then I'll be right back. We'll say our goodbye privately.
Okay.
Okay, so there it is. That's another episode right there. Hey, listen. The nice thing about not caring about the numbers is I don't care about the numbers. It doesn't matter if this thing blows up or doesn't blow up. The idea that we got to talk about some of the inner workings of, again, one of the most unique situations in entertainment ever. A late night program on the highest level that was autonomous and got to be autonomous. And I think that we just had a really neat conversation that shows part of the magic as to why it was such a unique, beautiful situation. The gal who basically headed up HR for almost the entire run at CBS, Janice Penino Hoffman. We're so grateful that she was on here today. Once again, one sponsor only with the Letterman podcast, hello-deli.com. Head on over there if you want to buy a Late Show shirt, a Late Show mug, whatever. Send Rupert a note. He packs this stuff personally. That has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.